All right, this is February 16th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission, and it is 5:33 p.m. And I will turn it over to Roy Clark to get us started.
Good evening. I will call to order the February 16th meeting of the Sustainability. Patrick, will you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Clark, you are here. Rob McCann, are you on? I don't think I've seen him yet. Carl Baker.
Here.
Jim Flanagan.
Aye.
David Friedman.
Here.
Jennifer Futterman.
Here.
Sandra Garrett.
Here.
Greg Gauthier.
I'm here.
Lonnie Miller.
Here.
All right. So we have a quorum, and I will keep an eye out for Mr. McCann.
I'd like to welcome all the commissioners, staff members, and visitors. For visitors, there will be time for public comment later in the meeting. Please keep your microphones muted during the meeting. Please raise your hand to be called to speak at the appropriate time, and then unmute your microphones. And for all, please do not use the chat feature in Zoom. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was mailed and posted last Thursday, February 11th. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
I move to accept the agenda.
Second.
Second was who?
Carl.
Oh, thank you. Any discussion of the agenda? All in favor of accepting the agenda, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? The agenda for tonight has been accepted, and we will move on to staff comments by Patrick. A lot of them have been covered in the memo in the agenda packet.
Yeah, just a quick update. Rob McCann did join us, so he is
Hello, everyone.
well as member of the public. So I'll continue to monitor that to see who else joins us. With regard to staff comments, again, everything was pretty much covered in the memo. The one update that I have is that the City Council did on Thursday approve the EV charger plan for expansion and to proceed with the lease agreement with Carbon Solutions Group. So I was on the phone with them today for a little kickoff call, and it sounds like we should be moving forward actually at a pretty rapid pace because they've got most of the design information that they need for at least one of the locations, and then the second is soon to follow. So anyway, so we should start seeing action on that front very soon. And that's the only update I have.
Okay, so we'll move on now to public comments. I think before I go through the 30-second speech about public comments, I'll ask first if there's any visitors, if there are any visitors.
This isn't a public. This isn't a public comment. This is just. I thought it'd be a good time. Can you hear me? You can hear me. On number 5, the Climate Reality Project meeting that was brought up here by Patrick. I also wanted to mention that I've become aware of the Sierra Club has put out a beautiful, very insightful and colorful 1.5 pages of their commitment to getting rid of greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know, some of you might have seen it. It was Kim Floyd who sent it to me. And I think it looks like, you know, you've mentioned this one organization, there's possibility for collaboration there. Certainly this Sierra Club notification was very impressive, and they are very interested in doing any collaboratory work with municipalities. So not just, you know, the straight citizenry, but also people working for the government. I guess that's what we're doing.
All right.
Want to mention it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair Clark, if I could, there's a couple of follow-up questions that I have for Patrick on the EV charger expansion. based on sort of some of them were covered by council, but I just want to get a couple of clarifications. Now that I've had a chance to sort of look a little bit more at it and read the staff report. A few questions. So the purchase order is funded by the sustainability fund, at least in part. There's also some of course, the grants from AQMD. So will the lease revenue, the $25 and $100, will that get credited to our account so that we, sort of, get some of the money back, quote unquote?
That's my plan.
Okay, great. All right. Obviously, you're not the one in charge of it, but that's a great answer.
I believe that I said that in the staff report.
Okay, I may mention.
So it must be so.
Okay, I may have missed it in the staff report because I saw that the charges were there. And then there's a question. So a couple of the units, the level 2 unit charging stations will they're dual port. Will each of the stations be full power, or if 2 cars are using it at the same time, is the power sort of halved? Because there are some new software that does that.
Yes, I believe that they are equipped with power sharing. And so I do believe that it manages according to the usage rates of the vehicle.
It's called power management, and that was reflected in the PowerPoint that I sent you from our Reach Codes meeting. So
Yep.
I thought that would be the case, but just wanted to find out. So ChargePoint is the vendor. Will the locations be showing in their app? So this is for the user. This will be just ChargePoint. They won't see Carbon Solutions Group. They'll just see ChargePoint. Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the ChargePoint is the network that they are using.
So, but they're the ones that have the app and everything. So you just go, and if you want to charge up, you could just check their app, and that'll show, which stations are available then.
Right. Just for information, that ChargePoint is the provider for the Agua Caliente tribe and the Spa Resort Casino parking lot too. So they've got a number of units there.
Okay, that's good. That's good saturation for downtown. One last question. This is sort of, I guess, a question that was discussed at the council meeting. But technology is moving very quickly in this area. And I understand that your comment from council is that, well, it's not an exclusive agreement, but on the other hand, they are getting some prime downtown locations. So is there any incentive other than they want to get the revenue for them to update the stations, based on new technology? I mean, it's not in the contract, but you sort of have to assume that that's in their interest, so they'll just do it.
Yeah, I think the more and the faster that people charge is always in their interest. So to the extent that it changes significantly in the near future, then I think that they would upgrade the units. And that was part of the conversation that we had with you. If in fact the lease terminated or the agreement terminated, or for cause or otherwise at the end of the term, we would have the option of buying the units. And so it really just depends on whether or not they've upgraded the units, whether or not, so anyway, I think they would be looking into that just based on utilization and wear and tear and that kind of thing.
Okay, fine. All right, thanks. Those are my questions. Some sort of follow-ups from the council meeting last weekend. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Before we move on, then, are there any more questions on the staff update? Hearing none, then public comments. As I was starting to say, I'll ask first if there are any visitors who would like to make public comment before reading the standard statement.
Yeah, my name's Jake. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I am a new resident to Palm Springs relatively last September. My question is around residential composting. I've been tracking your internal sort of documents around organics ordinance and such, and I didn't see any particular explanation as to.
I'm froze.
So I don't know if I'm supposed to ask the question in its entirety right now, or if I just am here to
We know
ask the council.
normally 3 minutes for public comment, so please go ahead and ask your question. We can't.
All right.
That's his question. You want to know the status of personal composting? in
For
Palm-
residential, yeah.
I think it's fair to say I'm, as qualified as anyone to tell you this, that there is.
Actually, can we respond to the question right now?
No.
I don't know. That's what I was asking.
Yeah,
No.
no, I don't think we can, but we do,
Okay,
but we do have an agenda item for this. So we're happy to talk about it then.
great. Thanks, Patrick.
Sure.
All right.
So Jake, if you can ask your question, if you have anything more to add. And then as Patrick said, we do have an item about that in one of the subcommittee reports.
Great. So my sort of general question is is there a plan to have residential composting for the community? I understand that as a restaurant owner, you can call in and have your own program set up as a restaurant, but it didn't appear to be something that a resident could achieve. And so I just wanted to get a sense of where we are in that space for the city and what the direction looks like and what kind of timeline, et cetera, which may already be part of your update, but that was sort of what I wanted to ask in case it wasn't part of your update.
Great.
Yes, thank you. And we will cover that.
Thank you.
Meeting. Is there
Great.
any? Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Hearing none, then we'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is presentations. There are none. So the next item is meeting minutes for the January 19th regular meeting. The meetings were emailed and posted on Thursday, February 11th. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you,
Second.
Rob. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Lonnie. Is there any discussion on the minutes? There is none. So all in favor of accepting the January 19th meeting minutes, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? I think we have one from, would have one from Sandra.
Oh, no, yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And now we'll move on to old business. And the first item is greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Patrick?
Thank you, Roy. Let me just see. Okay. So I just wanted to, I'm gonna minimize my screen here. So I wanted to go through with you some of the highlights from the greenhouse gas inventory report that we received from our consultant. I had mentioned in previous meetings, they had been working on this for a while and got delayed because they were waiting for a data set on vehicle miles traveled that just recently became available. So they prepared a short memo describing their results for the 2010 update as well as the 2018 assessment. They presented to us at the Solar and Green Building Subcommittee meeting a couple of weeks ago. So we were able to get a preview of that. And I wanted to share some of the information with you guys tonight. Again, it's a fairly high level at this point and it's draft. So if there's any questions you guys have, I can relay those to the contractor and we can get those addressed and also kind of have a discussion about some of the high level findings at this point. So just real quickly, I'll kind of run through some of the elements of the presentation. The name of the contractor was Placeworks, and Eli Crispy is the main person who was working with us on the report and the development of the data. So the biggest thing with regard to the 2010 data set, and as you may recall, the city did an initial emissions greenhouse gas inventory in 2010, which was released in 2013. And it used basically the best available information at the time. And so what we asked Placeworks to do was to go back and look at 2010 and do an update for 2018 so that we were comparing to apples if we were going to do a look back to see how we were doing in comparison to 2010. So the first step in the process was to update the 2010 information, and most of the updates for the inventory were related to emission factors and other methodologies that were used in 2010 have been current. So the primary one, as I had mentioned earlier, was the change to vehicle miles traveled information. And so that information was updated to be more accurate. So that is the biggest thing that changed in the 2010 data. The other changes were fairly minor in terms of their impact, although they did align the data better with more recent and more current methodologies. So for example, the off-road changes in allocation of off-road equipment, carbon sequestration information, emissions factors for methane were updated based on their greenhouse gas potential. And so anyway, so there are a variety of kind of minor changes that were made to the 2010 data in addition to some of those other things I mentioned. So I wanted to show you their results basically of those changes. It did lead to a result in 35% more total emissions in our 2010 data. And that was primarily because of the transportation data. As you can see from this chart here, the transportation emissions were about 87 metric tons in the original analysis, and those increased to 254,000 metric tons in the updated version. So clearly a significant increase in that data. Some of the other data went down, so there were some adjustments that were made there. But anyway, the major takeaway from this is, with regard to the 2010 data, is that the major emissions change to that original data set really occurred in the transportation sector. So that's really the major change that we saw in that data set. And so I wanted to see if you guys had any questions or comments about the 2010 update before we get into the 2018 comparison.
Patrick?
Yes.
I just had one comment about the update, and that was relating to the methodology that was used for calculating the transportation portion. It's explained in more detail in the report, but I thought it was interesting that they had replaced what they called they were using an origin destination method versus a geographic boundary method. And the one they're using now really considers where people are going, where they're starting from and where they're going to. And I thought that was really quite interesting that they'd made a significant change. And also thought that, as we go forward in the next months and years and, talk about reducing our carbon footprint and where transportation is the biggest contributor, we might be able to use some of that modeling to evaluate different scenarios that we're talking about, like things relating to parking or adding bicycle routes and so forth. But I thought that was really quite significant.
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to the potential for us to look at alternatives, right? So if we have some more data on the comings and goings of people, could we do things that are targeted to those comings and goings?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, great point.
Patrick, question?
Yes, Rob.
Oh, sorry.
Looking through this, I didn't get a question answered that's very straightforward, and I wonder if you have the answer to it, which is AB 32, Assembly Bill 32, called on California to reduce its greenhouse gas emission levels to 1990 levels by 2020. And then the city passed a climate action plan in 2013 that called for reducing our own carbon emissions by 7%. Do you know if we met those metrics in 2020?
So that's a good question. And so I have two answers to that. So the first was that when they did the original 2010 greenhouse gas inventory, that indicated that we had met our 2020 target already in that data set. So we were already under that 1990 level.
Mhm.
However, given the changes that they made in the emissions factors, we're certainly well exceeding that now if we don't go back and update our 1990 data set. So that's something that we did talk about at the Solar and Green Building Committee meeting. And so we are going to ask them to go back and update our baseline so that we can now compare it to the baseline. So we weren't sure if that was going to be valuable. So we wanted to kind of wait to see what the 2010 redo told us. And so what it tells us is that we need to go back and adjust the baseline. So,
Okay, thank you.
And that was my comment as well, just to make sure, because we've got 3 goals, the one that Commissioner Vice Chair McCann just mentioned, which is probably, we'll see whether we get there. And then there's the 40 by 30 and the 80 by 50. And so that's comment that I've raised is that, we have the baseline and then a trajectory of, where do we need to go from here? And I think that's going to be a scary diagonal, but it's very useful. And it goes to the point that Chair Clark just mentioned, and that helps us sort of develop policies as we can see, okay, this is where we need to go, and X measure will help us reduce it. So yeah, thank you. I have other questions, but that was the one that I wanted to sort of, is my preliminary comments, make sure we get them.
all right. Lonnie, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, so there were some things that of the old methodology that made us look better, but there are some things, and there were some things that made us look worse when you look back on it. And the big one with almost every one of them is actually the CO2 equivalency change, from going from 21 methanes equals 1 CO2 up to 28. I mean, that's quite a big jump.
Yeah.
And I think that took the ones that went over, that really took them over.
Mhm.
Like the wastewater treatment plant and
Right. Yeah,
And
where the
also
methane was prominent. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yep. That's it, and it goes to show you that these need to be living documents. Quite honestly, you can't just think
Yeah.
of one and done. So, so it's important that we go back and revisit.
Yeah.
All right, David, Roy, did you have something?
Just as science advances, the methodology changes.
Right.
Should I wait till you finish the 2018 before I go my other questions, or should I hit them now? Your call.
If they have to do with 2018, I would save them.
Okay, they're sort of more general, sort of looking
Okay.
forward. So I'm planning on saving them. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me share again. All right. So then we get to 2018. And again, these were very similar to our 2020 numbers. As you can see here, the ratios are pretty much the same, very similar emissions and scale of emissions. So there wasn't a huge change between 2010 and 2018, which is kind of good because we did have a lot of growth in that period. So there was a lot happening in that time period. The good things, a couple of the good things, one is commercial buildings declined in terms of their emissions. Residentials also declined a little bit. And so that's one of the reasons that we are anxious to get them to do the 2020 look ahead to incorporate the impact of the move to desert community energy. So that's going to be one of their next tasks, is to do the look ahead to see how what we've been doing may have impacted our numbers even just in the past couple of years. So here's a nice little summary sheet that shows you where some of the biggest changes occurred with regard to the data sets.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Residential, energy, where was that? so anyway, so this is a breakdown of some of the different components of some of the data sets. So it gives you a sense of where some of the increases and decreases occurred. But for example, non-residential natural gas went down, non-residential propane went down, alternative daily cover, which is actually, we talked to them a little bit about this. This alternative daily cover is sort of a non-issue. It was always a made up number by the state. So it really had nothing to do that was reflective of our actual practices. So that number just, we're going to have them.
What is that? Which one?
It's the alternative daily cover for waste. So essentially what it means is that the Cal Recycle assumed that some portion of your waste was used, or some portion of the waste that you sent to landfill was organic and it was used as cover for the landfill. And so they never really did any analysis to figure that out. That was just sort of a blanket percentage that they used.
Literally a blanket on the landfill.
Yes, a blanket. Yeah. And so anyway, so that number should be zero, and it should have all been zero for a while because none of our landfills said that they did that. So anyway, again, a little increase there in water energy use for water and wastewater, decrease in the water electricity. So anyway, so there's again, some fluctuations up and down, but a total increase of just 1% in the overall emissions.
Well, that on the wastewater treatment plant, that changed between 2010 and 2018. That was the period of time when they built a solar array to energize the plant, excepting for it only energizes it for 60 to 70%. So we're a little short in that department. The rest of it is, producing. It's not in that.
It's 6 o'clock.
Yeah. So there were also a number of other wastewater treatment plant changes that occurred in there too. I think they came online. So I think that combination of things probably resulted in those lower energy usages. The other thing that was somewhat notable, it wasn't a big part of the emissions, but off-road equipment increased quite a bit. And this is partly due to all the construction that was occurring here during that time frame. So it just gives you kind of some indication about how what we do actually has an implication for these sorts of emissions factors. Sometimes you don't really notice it because you don't do things in a certain way. So anyway, so interesting things happening. So that's really what I wanted to highlight on the data front. So happy to take questions or comments, any observations that you guys have in addition to what we just talked about.
I have a question, Patrick.
Yes, Jim.
So are we going to do, you said we're going to do a 2020 update. And I guess my concern is that if 2020 is a COVID year, I can't imagine every single number is going to be an outlier. We had no tourists, no hotels, no restaurants, and lots of outdoor propane. I mean, is it even worth doing a 2020 data point?
That's a really good question. We did talk to them a little bit about that. And I think it's probably worth having a more in-depth conversation about how they would do that. Because they did describe a couple of things that they could do. But like you said, it may not be very fruitful for us to do that. The only thing I think is helpful is to look at that and again, maybe it's just a very limited look ahead, because I think what would have been impacted is by Desert Community Energy and the switch. So maybe they just do a look ahead at that and tell us maybe what the impact is based on 2018 data for that portion, because that may be helpful.
Okay.
So, and maybe they can spend their money on doing the 1999 update.
Yes.
No.
I think David was next, right?
Yeah. One specific question, and then a couple of comments. One specific question on the 2018 data, and I didn't catch this when we had our committee meeting. There is for 2010 the city inventory, but not for 2018. And I thought the city is included in the community because of wastewater and other things. So I think it is an aggregate number, but it's not, that should be clarified, just sort of, we know that it's not, they're not two separate ones. And I'm not sure whether you want to, or they have the data to separate out the city from the 2018. I wasn't sure why we have the city data for 2010, but not for 2018, at least in the PowerPoints. Let me just put that way. Is they may have the data and it's just they didn't cover it in the PowerPoint. They didn't separate it out in their materials.
Yeah, that, you know, that's a good question, because I'm just looking at, that is a good question. I did not notice that either, and I will ask them about that.
Yeah, it just sort of to compare that. And then that sort of drives my next comment specifically for the city, is that, you know, I see all these city council reports of replacing vehicles, and sort of the question for you and, you know, staff is, you know, to start giving consideration for looking at EVs. I mean, maybe they don't work for police cruisers, but for example, for code enforcement, where they're running around town all the time. And as the city puts in all of these, you know, new chargers, they're going to, plus the ones in the city facilities, there'll be a lot more opportunities for charging. So if you could sort of float that, you know, the state, Governor Newsom, as you know, announced fairly aggressive EV chargers. And once again, since we know that vehicle mile traveled is our largest contributor to the GHG, if the city can put its money where its mouth is and start taking some of those emissions literally off the road by investing in EV vehicles, EVs, where that makes sense. And I could think sort of for, you know, code enforcement might be, you know, definitely one area.
Yeah, and I do believe that we need to have a strategic conversation about fleet vehicles as we move forward, especially because one of the things that we haven't done yet is the electric vehicle charging for the maintenance yard.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about what it is we're going to be purchasing and how we're going to move in that direction. The other point related to that actually is I did have a conversation today with somebody who works in the hydrogen field.
Yeah.
So they are going to put me in touch with somebody who may be interested in placing a couple of hydrogen fueling stations here in town.
Okay.
So anyway, so that could be an additional element to our alternative energy mix.
Yeah, that's a new technology, but some vehicles have that. And then sort of the next sort of, you know, rhetorical question is combination of when they'll sort of finish all of the various sort of loose ends. And, you know, are you planning to get this to council sort of next month, April? I guess what's the plan to get the final inventory to council as a discussion item, so we can, you know, sort of, you know, use that as a proxy for, I guess, the now withdrawn climate action roadmap, which.
Right. So I think that it's probably pretty important that we have the 1990 update before we would do that, because otherwise we don't have a comparison point. So I'll talk to them after as the week goes on about the timing of all that, and when they think that they might be done with their current data set and when they might be able to do that 1990 data.
Okay, yeah, I strongly agree that having the 1990 data is critical then, because that's the one that sort of help us drive future policy discussions. Okay, that's it, and then we'll just add this to, you know, continued discussion of committee meeting in 2 weeks.
Great.
Thank you, Roy. There was 2 things that I wanted to mention, and that's, you know, the change in the state protocols and whatnot. That was part of the reason why there had been, you know, these changes that came about. And there's a number of basically their references that they've applied to this that I would love to get my hands on, because then we're going to be able to use them going forward. So I've got a whole list of those, and I wondered if it's kind of like it wasn't their job to, you know, give us a list of their references, but I'd sure like to get a hold of them. There's some in particular having to do with the wastewater treatment facility. And then the other thing, and that cogeneration is terribly high. I wouldn't have expected to be this high, and I wonder why. That's always seemed to have been sort of a mystery to so many of us on the commission. And then they're really off in a lot of the wastewater treatment things. One of the odd things is they're not including septic tank systems. Okay, septic tank, they truck septic tanks in every day of the week to the wastewater treatment plant. That's where the water is purified from septic tanks. And yet they're not including it. It's like, so who gets credit for it? You know, Palm Springs should, of course. Who else is going to get credit for it? I mean, they're within the city limit. See what I mean?
Yeah,
It doesn't make sense to me.
okay. Yeah, I can ask him for clarification on that because I wasn't sure exactly what they.
It was when I spoke to her about that on that separate phone call I had, it was like they were, you know, the comments were like, well, hey, we're doing you a favor. I don't see it that way.
Right. It may have, it may have been kind of a protocol or whatever protocol they were using didn't include that, but I'll ask them about it.
I'm sure they've had a lot of meetings with you and with other people on the commissions, but I'm really disappointed that one of the authors isn't here tonight to explain this.
Right. Well, it didn't actually invite them. So this is not their fault. So they came to the.
You didn't invite them?
I didn't. So, I'm happy to have them back when they're final, when the report is final.
Okay, fair enough.
And if we want to have a separate call, kind of like we did last time, if people are interested to get into the weeds, then I'm happy to do that. But yeah, I didn't invite them today.
Maybe I should like make a list of some of the protocols that are of interest to me, and then they can help me find out how I can get a hold of those to make them useful to me.
Right. And I think the other thing is that we are still waiting for the actual report, right? Which may have more information on all those documents too. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else? All right. So I think my big takeaways at this point are that transportation is a really big deal, and we need to figure out how we're going to manage that. And that there are other opportunities for us still, I think, on the residential and commercial and city side of the house. So I think there's everything still on the table in terms of opportunities for reductions. But again, transportation sure looks like it's a big nut to crack in terms of really getting significant decreases.
Well, and then the wastewater treatment plant.
Sure, for our
actually wastewater treatment plants actually number one.
Our city ones. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me, and more to follow on this certainly. So all right.
I thought it was pretty good actually. I wasn't disappointed at all. I thought it would be. Yeah.
Okay, so the next item under old business is the smoking ordinance. And just a little background, the commission has been working on recommendations for the smoking ordinance for over 2 years. In fact, it was 2 years ago, this meeting, that we voted on a proposed ordinance that Carl Baker had put together. In the meantime, the Human Rights Commission had also put together an ordinance, which we had a copy of and were able to review. And since that time, Carl has been working with one of the members of the Human Rights Commission to compare the documents. And what he has presented to us is a document that contains points from both our ordinance, proposed ordinance, and their proposed ordinance. And I'll turn it over to Carl.
Hey, Patrick, can you pull that up for me, please? Or did Patrick step away? Oh, there you go. Thanks, Patrick. So yeah, as Roy just said, so human rights actually did their draft before we did. We were unaware they had one, and we worked on our own. So this is a red line version, meaning you'll see the strikeouts and the additions in different, hopefully in different colors. Everyone's computer does it differently. It looks like it's blue in here instead of red. But basically what you'll see are the bottom line is prohibiting smoking in common areas, in multifamily residences, and for example, outside of public spaces like bars and restaurants. So that's the meat of what it's doing, because currently it's already illegal to smoke, like walking down the sidewalks or in public parks or in playgrounds. Things like that are already on our records, on our laws. But and also added cannabis, to just see, because there was a big question 2 years ago when cannabis was just rolling out. Cannabis, although can be a medication that has a prescription, but smoking it out in public is still illegal. Just think of cannabis the same as you do as alcohol. You can have a six-pack of beer in your trunk, but you can't have a beer in your car and drinking as you drive around. You can have, I don't know, an eighth of what, I don't know how they sell marijuana, but you can have that in your trunk, but you can't have it in your car smoking it as you drive around. So it's treated the same way in marijuana and cannabis. The odor, we treat smoke as smoke. So the other big thing is going to be for multifamily residences. Many cities, for example, Santa Monica instituted this, wow, it's 8-9 years ago. So you can't smoke in condominiums or apartment buildings unless you go outside 25 feet away from entryways to smoke a cigarette. Obviously, you can't smoke cannabis in public. The alternative to that are people that are using medicinal marijuana have options such as vaping or edibles that don't create the odor that cigarettes do. Although we do, and so bring up vaping, we do tie in vaping with cigarette smoking. So as you know, you can't go to a restaurant and sit there and vape at the dinner table. So the same goes for cannabis or tobacco products. You can't vape in those general areas. So those are the big touch points. The rest of really, oh, and I'll thank Commissioner David Friedman, because we also changed it from just sending it over to the nuisance law. So it's no different than you calling your neighbors because they're playing their music at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just a nuisance violation. Those are the key points. Any questions? Bonnie?
I have one. I think it's just a little typo, and I just wanted to mention it. And it's on page 15. It's the very top line, and it looks to me like it's on C.
15C, okay.
15C, and it looks like it should be violations of this article are subject to a civil action brought by, I mean, it's crossed off.
Okay. Yeah, no, civil action is right. There are no civil actions. We took.
It is, but it's crossed off.
Yeah, it's not a civil action. We're only using the nuisance law.
Oh, well, so what would
Taking
it
one to
be?
court. You're not taking anyone to court over this. It's just a nuisance violation. So
Okay.
you call the same people you call for noise violations.
Well, maybe this sentence just needs to be altered just a tad.
I'll take a double look at that. Thank you for that.
Okay, and then if nobody minds too much, I would like to make a motion.
Can I, well, make the motion, yeah, and I have questions.
You can always make a motion.
Yeah.
No one can stop you from making a motion.
Was that a yes, Roy?
You can always make a motion.
Okay,
Yes, and we can have discussion after the motion.
Motion, yeah.
okay, thank you. I move that the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission vote to bring forth to the Palm Springs City Council an amendment to the municipal code which establishes regulations applicable to commercial and residential clean indoor air and health protection to regulate tobacco and cannabis product use.
So there's a motion on the floor. I'm
You want me
taking.
to read it again?
Roy, did you get all that?
Well,
Where did I get all that?
The motion to bring,
Okay, I went from what my motion is to bring it before the city council. I believe that's what happens
Oh,
next.
hello.
And I believe that I would like to move for this to pass through the commission, the Sustainability Commission with a rubber stamp saying A-OK. Obviously, you're not going to write that. And for what is stated up here on the you know, the title.
Yeah.
you basically referred to the title of the document in the motion.
Yes, I can say it's basically an amendment to the municipal code, which establishes regulations applicable to commercial and residential clean indoor air and health protection to regulate tobacco and cannabis product use.
Is there a second?
Second,
Who's that?
Carl.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Yes, David has his hand up first.
I looked at my notes from 2 years ago, and unfortunately, I kind of have the same. I do have the same concerns that I have last year. I'm very uncomfortable with how the ordinance attempts to deal with cannabis, and that's exceedingly unclear. So my first comment is, what exactly is supposed to be covered? There's a definition of cannabis, but as I mentioned 2 years ago, it's not the definition in the city's very comprehensive provisions in the municipal code about cannabis. There are all sorts of provisions in the zoning code about smoking lounges, and and then you have the definition, but the definition is only used in the whereases, which aren't even in the city's form, and so there's actually no use of the term cannabis in the substantive provisions. There's references to marijuana in the definition of smoke and smoking, so I assume that's what's supposed to be cannabis. But then I don't understand sort of what the definition of cannabis is doing except in the whereases, which I don't think that's very helpful. And so in terms of tobacco, I'm comfortable with this. In terms of cannabis, I just think this needs more work to make sure that it does not step on anything that the city already authorizes. And if it is intended to modify anything that the city already authorizes under either the municipal code or the zoning code, that needs to be a lot clearer than it is. So, I think more drafting I can't vote on this just because I'm just uncomfortable. It's not sufficiently drafted for me to be comfortable to vote in favor of it. Maybe there's more work to be done. And it can be brought back at the next meeting, but I can't vote on it just because it doesn't meet at least my drafting standards. With all due respect, it's just not clear enough for what's intended for cannabis. It needs more work in that area.
Commissioner, I totally understand your objections and duly note them. There are lots of things on the city books regarding cannabis. We were trying to attempt to just bring everything in together at one page at one time, if that makes any sense. But yes, there could be, you could have a whole separate ordinance just on cannabis and smoking and vaping, if you want to go down that pathway.
Question?
All right, well, okay, fine. It's just not clear exactly what's intended to be, what in particular for the lounges, whether that's intended to prohibit activity that's currently authorized under the zoning code.
Well, I think it goes through all of those, outside those situations that don't fit neatly. But in the last 2 years, there've been a lot of changes in the way we think about these things. And if anything, I think it's been clarified or it's been updated to where we are now. So I was able to, whereas I agree with you 2 years ago, in particular, we talked about newborns and intrauterine pregnancies, and I didn't agree with that at all. But now that there are 3 references on smoking, is that called? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
vaping.
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that now that that's there, it's like, oh, well, that takes care of that, you know? So I'm really good with this. I think it's time to move it on and get it on the books and let's move ahead. And I think that I trust the city council and their legal counsel will be able to take a look at this as well. And if there's an issue, we'll get it back.
May I say, I see an issue of all smoke, wherever it's coming from, whatever the source. And I know a lot of the tobacco vaping is really obnoxious and it isn't smokeless. I think some of the cannabis vaping is smokeless and you would never be aware. So I just think it's all obnoxious smoke, no matter if it's coming from car exhaust or whatever source
True.
it is. Also, it's interesting that right now in downtown, there are 3 cannabis smoking lounges separate from the cigar and cigarette, where they have like kind of a smokers club outdoors. But right now there are 3 right downtown that are poised and ready to reopen or open a new cannabis smoking lounge, which seems rather like opening a bar. I mean, it's social, you're sharing, you're hanging out, it's not a come and go, you're not wearing a mask. So I was a little surprised that they're saying they're poised and just waiting for the word that they can be back and open again.
Well,
It's scary.
I think that this will cover that and having this in place is not a moment too soon.
I agree.
So,
Are there any other comments?
Lounges, smoking lounges are permitted. You just can't serve food and they have to be closed to public and the air has to be purified. And as Commissioner Friedman mentioned, the city now has a measuring device that can measure the exhaust from these smoking clubs. And again, I don't have all of those numbers to determine whether or not they're in permissible limits.
Great, great.
I have a question for you, Carl.
Yeah.
So I tried to read this to see what the rules were about multifamilies, and as I understood it, you can only not smoke in common areas of multifamily. You can still smoke within your unit. Is that right? I didn't read it
You can't
otherwise.
smoke in multifamily dwellings.
Maybe I didn't see where that was. I just saw that in enclosed areas, common areas of multifamilies are off units. So this still prohibits people from smoking within their house if they're in a condo, but they can smoke in their house if they have a private home.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not sure what the reason is for why some people can smoke
Because
in their house. But
you're in a standalone building, you're not sharing common HVAC.
yeah, but I'm in a multifamily and there's no common HVAC and I'm not within breathing area of my neighbor's house. We're attached on one wall. So I'm unclear.
Yeah, that's true. That's something that can be considered. There are some, Palm Springs is unique in our abundance of multifamily units. And many do perhaps only share a garage as a common wall. That could be
Right.
argued that I'm not sharing a ventilation system with my neighbors and I'm significantly far enough from them that I'm not disturbing them. But the bottom line comes down to if you're smoking in your house and say where you live, chances are your neighbors are not going to call the police because they're offended by smelling your secondhand smoke while they're on their patio grilling their dinner.
Well, I mean, that's 2 separate issues, whether it gets enforced or not, or whether there's a law in the books. I'm concerned about putting a law in the books that doesn't get enforced in one place and does get, I mean, it shouldn't be capricious.
And
That's
this
my concern.
is something we did discuss in quite a bit of depth in the past.
Yeah.
I think we were looking, at one time we were looking at it like the way hotels are covered in this version of the ordinance, where some percentage of units could allow smoking, but there would have to be, information would have to be given to the tenants and so forth. It was somewhat complicated, but we did discuss that in the past.
Yeah, in an effort to combine the two, I took that because that did go down a rabbit hole of a percentage of units and the amount of time the resident tenant had been there was an old tenant versus a new tenant. And it just created its own little mountain.
I thought the way we left that is we could, the HOA or the common area were allowed to prohibit smoking. Maybe that,
Yes.
didn't that come up?
But to merge it with the HRC, that I left that language out. It's not to say you can't ask for it to be brought back. That's what we're discussing. And who knows what HRC, their meeting was last week, so they already met for this month, so they won't be able to discuss this until the March meeting.
Okay, well, that's still a concern of mine, so.
And that brings up a point. We have a motion and a second. I was going to make us, and we can certainly vote tonight, but I would suggest that we do wait until the HRC meets and get some feedback from them. And if they accept it as it is, then we can go forward. If they have some changes, then we may need to consider those changes.
Well, wouldn't we do that anyway? Couldn't we vote and they make their changes and then we'll get it back?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was implying.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
We could vote on it. And then once they voted on it, then we, Carl and Edwin can collaborate again and report back to us. And then as far as going to the city council, it's really up to the city manager and the council as to,
Thank you.
and they would, and I expect that they will want to have some public hearings on this.
True.
Right. So can I just offer a process thought, which is that back in the day when this was pulled and our progress was stopped, basically we were asked to go back out and do town hall meetings about it. So I believe we don't necessarily have to decide on all of the different questionable pieces. So for example, there might be still open questions about what we do with multifamily or how we define a multifamily unit. But those are the kinds of things that we would maybe present at a town hall meeting to say, here's the guts of it. Here are two pieces that we would really love your input on, because these are areas that are, we couldn't decide or there was some controversy about. So anyway, so I think that is perfectly legitimate to have a couple of holes or to have a couple of places where you're seeking further input. And you would kind of structure maybe some larger conversation around those things, because those are probably the things that are going to be most interesting to people to comment on too, most likely.
And we would certainly want to flag those things so that there are comments.
If I'm not mistaken, I read in this that if there was something that ended up getting thrown out, it's still, the rest of it would stand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Severability clause.
thank you.
I would just ask Patrick, I'm fine with your process suggestion. I would just ask that if the intent is to modify the current regime that council has substantially debated on cannabis, and in particular the various cannabis businesses and lounges, we get input from the industry on that, and it be clarified. It's still not clear to me, regrettably, what exactly is the intent to modify what is currently authorized. And so if that is in fact what's intended by this ordinance, then we get input from the industry about what that would be. As I said, I'm not comfortable without a rather in-depth analysis comparing this to the existing regimes under the municipal code and the zoning code. I see conflicts, and I can't resolve them at the right now.
Is there any other discussion?
I would like to say something. When this was brought up a couple of years ago, I think a few of us were concerned about the multifamily housing units and just it not being just that if you don't have enough money to have your own dwelling, that you can't use cannabis or have a place to use tobacco, which is still legal. And I'm not being a proponent of tobacco. So I think that, I'm pretty okay with that. I think that just taking away individual rights in this way, I thought it was going to be rewritten as well. And particularly with the cannabis, vaping can be very dangerous. I don't, just because it doesn't have smoke, I think it's more dangerous for the consumer than it may not be bothering other people. So I would also like to see this rewritten before I'm able to vote on it.
Mhm. Particularly about the cannabis rewritten?
Yes, and for the multi-family housing, because it just feels unfair. If you're not giving people a place to use this, if it is your medicine or if it's even recreational, it's still legal now. So I think that there has to be a way to, I don't feel like it's our right as the commission to be taking away individual rights, which when we had some presenters before, they presented to me, they said, well, when one person's rights begin, another person's rights end. And I understand that. So if you're sensitive to smoke, if it's going to bother you, even the smell, I don't really understand this, talking about the smell of cannabis. Maybe you don't like it. I don't know. I've never heard of people complain about that so much. I think not having the smoke and not being affected by that is one thing, but yeah, I'm not ready to vote on it tonight. I don't feel comfortable saying that I agree with the way that it is right now. So I do think there has to be more regulations.
Commissioner Futterman, you raised a very good question about equity and home ownership. That was one of the big things that Santa Monica had to deal with, because there are not a large number of multifamily units in Santa Monica as well. And they were saying, well, it's not fair to not allow a behavior in an apartment, but if I cross the street to a single family resident, I can do the very same behavior and it be legal.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we couldn't find an equitable solution to that conundrum. You can go 25 feet away from your resident and smoke outside, or at least non-controlled substances.
Couldn't there also be something internally in the home so that if you wanted to smoke in the home, or I'm just not sure if you're even smoking with the window open, it seems like that kind of smoke dissipates. Is there, I don't know. I'm not sure. You're right. It's an equity issue.
I would say in my building, we have 10 historic casitas from the 1920s. It's very clear in our leases that there is no smoking of any substance of any kind, even if you have a medical marijuana license. That's very clear, subject to the end of your lease. Of the 10 casitas here, 8 of the people are tobacco smokers, and they all smoke within their casitas. Now, not all of them have shared walls. Mine is freestanding, but so there was a woman with a young baby who was born here at the beginning of COVID. And when I was like, hey, you can't smoke, they're like, well, I don't want to go out. It's too hot or something like that. So what I'm saying is, in my experience, is if you're saying you can't smoke here, they go ahead and do it anyway, but they do it in a sneaky way. So they're still doing it. So how do you enforce that? And it is legal. That's like saying you can buy liquor, but you can't drink at home. You can't drink that wine at home. You can buy tobacco, and tobacco is a nasty habit, but I feel sorry for them, and they regenerate a lot of taxes, which were, but don't they have rights too? And I know in Texas, they'll have smoke-free places, or places where you can't have any pets at all, and people have allergies, or they just don't want kids or something like that. So they have those places for people who want that. But the general places are open to people who may want to smoke or drink or, use legal marijuana, not in Texas. But, it's not like you can't be smoking anywhere. You go to Redlands, you can't smoke anywhere. And again, I'm not a smoker, but I feel sorry for them. Or in bad weather, they're huddled around the entrance of office buildings and you can't get in without going through this cloud of tobacco smoke. So, they do have rights too. It's legal. So I don't know what to do about that.
Yes, Lonnie.
I guess what I'm hearing is that you Sandra, that you actually would feel more comfortable if there was an ordinance that you could call up and say, look, I've got this next door and I'm allergic to it, so, and you could actually get some movement there. But I mean, we're a little bit at the point where we don't even trust our ordinances. They don't have any muscle.
I don't know how you enforce that with a close neighbor without a lot of ill will, because they could lose their lease and be forced out within 30 days for breaking their lease.
Yeah, I would
But-
think for you that an ordinance, even with imperfection in it,
No.
it would be better than to not have an ordinance at all.
It's more leverage against them taking that risk, because they're thinking, well, no one's going to rat me out. I'll go ahead and smoke, And when you come into the courtyard, you're greeted, by all of this smoke. So even in the open areas. So it's a nasty habit, but they have rights. So I don't know.
This is obviously a big concern, and it goes back to discussions we had in the past. We do have a motion to accept this as is and move forward, but everybody has a vote, and we probably should do a roll call vote so that we get an accurate count. And if people feel strongly that more work needs to be done, that will come out in the vote. Are there any other comments? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead then and take a roll call vote? Could you do that, Patrick?
Sure. Chair Clark. So,
Yeah.
so just to back up, this is voting on the motion to carry this document forward to City Council.
That's correct.
Well, can I interject? So there's
Yes.
still a chance to come, because HRC is going to work on theirs. So I think there's still going to be a revised that maybe both of our commissions would look at prior to it going to City Council.
And maybe a friendly amendment to the motion would be to take it forward to collaborate with Human Rights.
HRC,
Right.
Human Rights Commission.
Up there, Lonnie, you made the motion.
Oh, should I remake it?
Accept the
No,
friendly
okay, I
amendment.
say aye. Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to make it again? The
No.
motion? I move, okay, I move,
Everybody.
go ahead with this. Do you want me to do the whole thing again? Okay. I move that the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission vote to bring forth to the Palm Springs City Council and the other body of
Rights Commission, HRC.
respected citizens, an amendment to the municipal code which establishes regulations applicable to commercial and residential clean indoor air and health protection to regulate tobacco and cannabis product use. And I already said aye, and
Okay.
All right. So Commissioner Miller, you vote
I'm
aye.
letting my cat out.
Chair Clark.
Yes.
All right. And Commissioner Flanagan.
I'm not ready yet. I'm gonna say no.
Okay. Commissioner Friedman.
No,
Commissioner Futterman.
No,
Commissioner Garrett.
No.
Commissioner Gauthier.
No.
Commissioner Baker.
Yes.
Commissioner McCann.
Aye.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3. So in a vote of 5 noes to 4 ayes, the noes have it. Shall not go forward at this time. But it sounds like it will come back for discussion at the next meeting after the HRC discussion.
Correct.
We will have that information.
Okay, so more to follow.
And then
And-
Carl, you will convey to the HRC.
Yes.
what
That's
we-
my question. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That was a good discussion. The next item under old business is fees at the Burstow parking structure policy statement. Jim?
I think this is the same policy statement that went out before, but I think there were a couple of minor edits that David had proposed that Patrick, we probably should have accepted. They're only a couple of words, so I can add them in. And to summarize really quickly, it's we had looked into fee parking, and we had found some kind of softball lob approaches to fee parking, and so we had come up with some language that was just a little more specific about after talking to a bunch of you guys, that might work out. And so I think the edits are in the first paragraph, policy statement under goal CR8, the last part of the sentence, such as walking, comma, bicycles, comma, public transportation would be inserted. And then after the end of that sentence, parentheses, replaces policy statement CR 8.11. And I can read that one to you if you need to, if anyone wants to hear it. 8.11.
Yes.
CR 8.11 just said the old language was ensures that in areas where parking and time installations are instituted, the maximum parking time frame allows for combinations of dining, shopping, entertainment activities. A study to determine if on-street parking and prime areas within parking structures should be available only on a pay basis should be explored. And then the only other change is after the first action, create a plan to identify availability. That replaces action statement CR 8.1. And CR 8.1 just says requires sufficient parking to serve employee and visitor parking needs. So we're providing more specific language to kind of move in this direction and accommodate merchants through this on-demand pricing structure ideas. And we're kind of just nudging that forward in the general plan. Is there any more questions?
Thanks for including my changes. There's only one substantive change, and I was going to make that point, but thank you for including it, referring to public transportation, because maybe the city finances will support bringing back the buzz, and that clearly is an alternative transportation method for downtown if it comes back again. And the other changes were just sort of drafting comments to the general plan steering committee, so they know exactly what our language was supposed to do.
Thank you, David.
So the intent of this is to vote on this as a recommendation to the general plan steering committee? Is that correct?
Yes.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'm going to move the text from Commissioner Flanagan with the modification that I suggested about public transportation.
And can I second the motion?
Yes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Do we need a roll call to have a count here? It sounds like there were two opposed.
Two, I had Greg and Carl as no.
Okay. Okay, so the motion passes. Thank you. And the next item under old business is sustainability scholarship status and feedback. Patrick.
Right, so we continue to get requests and respond to requests on the sustainability scholarship front. We're up to about $22,000 reserved in sustainability, reserved or paid in sustainability, and about $5,000 in recycling. I've got a list there of all the ones that have were included in our initial round of payments. So all those folks have been are in the process of being paid and should actually get their checks next week. We did have some requests that are still awaiting further information or further action from the requestors. So we'll continue to hold that money until we hear from them one way or the other. I will note that we did go out this week, starting yesterday. We went out with a round of radio ads for the Spanish-speaking radio stations to reach out to the gardening community about the availability of funds for leaf blowers. So I'm hopeful that that may generate some additional interest on their part. In terms of questionable or things to discuss with the commission, so we had one request for a variable speed pool pump for a portable vacuum unit. So as you may be aware, variable speed pool pumps tend to be much more energy efficient than regular pool pumps. Because you can vary the speed to accommodate your needs and your flow and your pool and the size of your pool. So you're not using quite so much energy all the time. This particular request is for a variable speed pump that you would normally see in a standing pool pump unit. But basically what the pool maintenance people do is they strap it to a cart and they are able to hook it up whenever they go into a home so that they can vacuum the pools without actually accessing the person's system or modifying the person's systems to do the vacuuming. So that is the request that was received. Those pool pumps are fairly expensive. I think they're about $1,100. So that was the first item I wanted to bring to your attention.
So, Patrick,
Yes.
I've designed and run a pool pump rebate program. And when we do the calculations for those, they tend to run 17 or 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's when their savings are effective. If these guys are just using this for an hour or two a day, it's not going to make any noticeable difference in energy production. But so just to put it out there.
Question?
Yep, Lonnie?
Okay. To that last comment, I'd like to point out that we just had terrible, terrible windstorms. And even though it took 12 hours up to 24 hours for the little tiny seeds and stuff to float to the bottom of your pool, there's no way in hell you're going to get all that stuff out without this exact kind of pool vacuum cleaner, basically. And it is a big unit. And I had the fellow that works with me, he brought it in today, the first time I'd ever seen it, but it's enormous. And that's the only way you can get all this debris off of the bottom of your pool. And when it's used, it's saving a lot of energy.
Wouldn't it be the case that, days like today or yesterday, that the pool people are out? I mean, my guy was here like at 4:30 or 5, which means and he's normally here in the morning, which means he was at, other people's houses all day, which means he probably is running this unit, as long as there's daylight, he's going to be out there. So I think that if that would be the case, Commissioner Flanagan, I understand your comment, but if the unit is being run by this, by the pool person, for an entire working day, wouldn't that result in some degree of savings?
It'll save a little bit of energy, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm just saying it's going to be a negligible amount compared to if you put one in a real pool. And a small amount, but all these have varying levels of savings, so it's up to you guys.
So I guess I will express my only concern with this is that when you vacuum a pool, you are operating it at the highest speed, and there is no savings.
Okay. Then, okay.
Actually, there's a similar study done on vacuum cleaners for homes, and in Britain they tried to sell low energy vacuum cleaners, and it turns out they vacuumed for 2 hours instead of 1 hour to get the same amount of dirt up.
Okay. Well, then that's the question. Then, is this going to result in savings even if it's used for an entire day? And if they're not going to use it at the lower setting, then does he really need it then?
Right. I think the only other question to be asked, and I don't know what the evolution of pool pumps has been, but if it is replacing a less efficient older unit, then that could also result in savings.
Okay.
Is this one of those that we need to do a little more research on to give it the okay? Personally,
Right.
what I saw today, I would not need any additional research.
Yeah. So I think the big question is whether or not they're replacing a much older pump, in which case there would be some, most likely some savings because the newer pumps are probably more efficient, period, regardless of what setting you have.
And going along with that, yeah, the variable speed aspect would be irrelevant.
Right. So, okay, let me follow up with them and just get a little more detail on what they've got right now. They did send me the model for the one that they want to purchase, and it is I mean, it's a good unit. It's the one that I have actually at the house. So, it's definitely a potential energy saver. All right, I'll follow up with them. And I assume assuming that they're replacing an older pump, I assume I have the support of the group.
Yes.
All right, I see nods. All right, great. So then the second question with regard to the scholarship program is I did get a request from 2 business owners who operate 3 businesses each. So they own 3 properties, and each of those properties would like to take advantage of the program. Each of the properties has a separate business license. So I wanted to just make sure with you guys that it made sense to give one owner more than one scholarship if they have in fact more than one business entity, basically. So, yes, right. Great.
I had 2 questions. One, what is the remaining balance in the scholarship program?
We've got about $25,000 left
And,
in the sustainability side, and then we've got lots of money left in recycling.
and are you finding the number of applicants or requests waning?
Yes, definitely so.
Patrick, can you say what the business is? Are these vacation rentals or, no?
Yeah.
They're multifamily properties. So they're like small multifamily units, like 6, 8 units.
And what would they, is it exactly the same thing they want to do for each of the 3 properties?
So that's a good question. The initial one that was requested was energy efficient lighting. So to switch over to LED lighting for their safety lighting. So that certainly would qualify. And then I believe that they had either similar or other plans for their other properties. They were just very excited and had lots of ideas. So they didn't actually propose anything specific for those other properties, but that was the gist of the request, the first one.
I think that those are exactly the kind of things that I think that those are kind of the people that we really want to encourage, because it has a substantial effect, and LED lighting is a good is a good example, subject to what Vice Chair McCann will be talking about shortly, so you can have that conversation with them, make sure that it's appropriately Kelvined and shielded and things like that. But other than that, I would support having it based on business license as opposed to who actually owns the business license.
Okay, Sandra.
I would just say, if there's an entrepreneur like that who's continuing to expand investment and development or their various businesses, I think those individuals or those partnerships should be definitely encouraged, because they're expanding their point of view and their position, and they're bringing in success. So I think those people should definitely be encouraged. Clone them. We need a lot more of those kind of business-minded people.
Right. I was also thinking about some people that own multiple restaurants here that certainly are completely separate business operations and that kind of thing.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's great. They'll be very excited, and I'll be excited to report back what they do.
You must feel like Santa Claus.
That's right. And now it's the fun part of my job, right? Writing those checks.
Okay, so we're finished with old business, and we'll now move on to new business. And the one item that we have is tree standards and Arbor. Patrick?
Sure. So at a previous meeting, I think Commissioner Garrett had suggested that we think about look at the Tree City USA program and see if that's something that we would want to move forward with. And so what I did was I just downloaded the standards that you have to meet to become a Tree City USA recipient. And so I wanted to include those for your consideration. And other than that, I think that's all I have to say about it. And I don't know if Commissioner Garrett wanted to say more, but those standards are there for your review.
I didn't have anything new to add, and I do apologize for not being here last month. It's been challenging, but I've kind of stumbled onto this. I thought this is a good thing, and I think as many of these kind of efforts that we could do, be it milkweed or trees, and getting involved in a program where you get sort of an official designation, which helps with tourism and people wanting to move here. So I, for full time and retire. So we need to clean the air. Plants, trees are the way to do it. So I can't see any downside other than the expense and the cost, but planting trees is a very good thing, and we should be pursuing this. So if this is an organization that we want to align with, great, but anything along these lines, I think is terrific.
Yep. Chair Clark and then Commissioner Miller.
One thing I was thinking is for the standards 1 through 3, it might be interesting to talk to maintenance, Stacy in particular, and find out just where we stand on those. Do we have established procedures? How much do we spend on tree maintenance and so forth, just to get a baseline for what we do in the city?
Right. Yeah, that was my thought too, is that I did the numbers. And so if we were spending about $96,000 a year on all that stuff, then we would qualify. And I just don't know where we are with regard to that.
It's 7 o'clock.
Oh, Commissioner Miller.
Oh, okay. I think that's a great idea. I love this program. I wish I had more time. I would love to do something like this. And especially because after this big windstorm, I saw a half a dozen trees, mature trees that were blown down at the roots.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not planted correctly. And then you go to a shopping center right before the summer and they've just pruned the bejesus out of these trees so that all the summer people that are going grocery shopping in whatever store it is, they have not a speck of shade to park under. I mean, there's some really stupid maintenance practices going on. And just to get the word out, just to do, an op-ed of some sort would be a helpful thing. But I can't take it on now myself. So one thing to do is to put the word out there and actually try to compose a group. I was thinking of the designer for the gardening project that we have. And if he would know somebody that if he lives there, or if there's somebody that he might know that is maybe somebody who's working with him, I think we're going to at some point have to draw from outside of our group to accomplish things like this. And I bet a lot of people would be really interested in the trees.
Also, is this something that we could interface with the Chamber of Commerce with? They might be able to have funds or something bring this into, or even again with the schools. I think it's an exciting project, and for young people, students, I think it could give them a real feeling of empowered ownership and making a real difference. Those are our trees, so. But I don't know if the Chamber of Commerce, if they're aware of this, but Tree City sounds very good. Let's go there.
Yeah, right.
regarding Arbor Day, that's April 30th. We have 2.5 months. I suggest that we plan on doing something to recognize Arbor Day. I think you had mentioned, Patrick, that the city has purchased, what, 50 trees to be planted?
Yeah, and I think they were actually more like 100. So I think that they've started to plant them. So I did send a note to Stacy, but I don't know that I heard anything back. So let me follow up with her.
Would there be a, some sort of ceremony that would be on the local news or something, or letting people know beforehand? Unlike, before where it was, came out after the fact.
Mhm.
But I think that could be a really nice,
Yeah,
real feel good, especially nowadays. Here we've just planted 100 trees. Wow.
Right.
yeah, and COVID. and that COVID.
Okay. I'll check.
Well, I was just going to say, we could have Patrick go out and make this announcement that the Sustainability Commission would like to get a group of outside people to come in and work with us. And because we just need more bodies.
No.
Then I'm thinking it's COVID. Maybe this isn't the year to do that.
It is though, because of that, and get the master gardener programs from the university and the arborists, and my sister's one, and they go crazy with the butchering of the palm trees and how, they actually kill these trees, which increase the value of your home to between $2,000 to $5,000 if you have mature trees. Think about that with home equity, so. Also, we've got, apparently, according to the last report from CVAP in December, which I'll be happy to send on the yearly report, which was delayed about a month. They're predicting an aging population, not so much families and younger people coming into the valley and Palm Springs in particular, but aging people that are coming here. And specifically, they are not driving, more pedestrian, public transportation, which means shade, and also the clean air, because a lot of them are coming here because they have asthma and they think, of course, like Arizona, warm weather, great, nice and dry, good for my asthma. Maybe not so. So we need to rectify that, because that aging population is coming, and that is going to be our demographic even more than it is now, from their studies. So we've got a lot of seniors coming.
Right.
Just getting back to Arbor Day, we have a new program coordinator starting next week. That might be a good assignment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
All right, I'll follow up with Stacy to find out some of those details and see what we can do with regard to the current tree planting and potentially with the program. So, all right, so I'll follow up at the next meeting on that.
Does that make sense though, as a project for Tracy?
Yeah, potentially. I think if we're way off the mark in terms of the budget that we spend every year, then I think it's might be a non-starter, but I think the other things we kind of do anyway. So yeah, so I think we could probably get that.
That's your discretion, but just a suggestion.
Right. Yeah.
I just got to say, it is going to be not that long. We're going to have to get back on single-use dinnerware, that's coming right up.
Yeah.
And I think it is now to start looking ahead on that.
Yep.
In fact, it was something that was contained in the Sierra Club newsletter. And I think it is time. And that's where the scholarship would be very useful as well.
Yeah.
I just don't think trees are really, it's a hard one.
Right.
I don't think it's.
Well, I'll get some more details from Stacy and then we can prioritize.
Super.
Okay, thank you. Now we move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. The first is Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building.
Thank you, Chair Clark. There's a lot in the written report, so I'll try to keep the oral version short. As usual, attending lots of webinars. The Energy Commission is moving forward on the energy code for 2022, goes into effect January 1, 2023. Does not look like we'll have an all-electric baseline, meaning that electric equipment is standard, but probably will have it for heat pump space heaters, which is essentially an air conditioner with a valve that just turns the other direction and will heat as well as cool your house. And so that would be the standard design for our climate zone. And there will be some pre-wiring requirements so that even if you have gas appliances, their house, new construction will be pre-wired for clothes dryers and cooktops, and then space heaters if they're not, water heaters and then space heaters if they're not required. There are a couple more reach codes that the Energy Commission approved at its business meeting at the end of January. You've got those slides. One of them is Chula Vista, and that's the one that I continue to look into because it focuses on renovations as opposed to new construction. And I think that's where I think we could probably have the most GHG reductions here in Palm Springs, given our housing stock situation. And then there's one for San Jose that just got filed with the Energy Commission on Friday, and that's a gas ban. So we'll see what happens with that one. So the Energy Commission is essentially relying on the reach codes to sort of advance policy, and then we'll probably do an all-electric baseline in 2025. There are a lot of public comments, including from Mr. Floyd on the call that were posted today on all electric, but I think it's mostly going to be just one of the units as opposed to both main units. CPUC, lots of proceedings. There was an email that I received today, Patrick, I'll forward it to you, with some new potential developments on an on-bill financing program under the chief program for small businesses. Looks like that'll go in effect in July. If that happens, that would be a good complement to the sustainability scholarship, because you would actually, and I assume, and I'll confirm this with the DC team, that essentially Edison would just add that to your bill. It would be third-party financing, but just be added to your electricity or bill to finance some energy efficiency programs. So I'll monitor that, and then Patrick, if and when that goes into effect, you already refer to chief, and we can just refer to that program as well. AB 1236, so the ordinance was approved by council last month and is now in effect. And then I did review the checklist, and Patrick, if you could follow up with Tasia, because I did check on the website and the old materials are still there. So if you can have her update the new materials now that that's the ordinance is in effect.
Yep, it should be up there either today or tomorrow.
Okay, as of 2, it wasn't there, but I didn't check at the end of the day.
It was after 2.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think I looked at 2 o'clock or so. And then finally, Patrick reported at our committee meeting that the American Wind Energy Association selected Palm Springs for a wind energy success story, which is great news. And we have a good couple of good success stories. I'll report on the DC wind project when I do my DC report. And Patrick, as I said, I'm happy to help you out on any research materials. So that is the New York Minute version of the committee report.
Thank you, David. The next is Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction.
So we have 2 topics that we wanted to touch on today. I'll do the composting first because we have somebody on the line interested in that topic. So I did meet with the a community representative who was interested in doing a community composting program. And we met with a funding organization who provides small grants to communities who want to move these things forward. Basically the gist of the conversation was that we do have space at the near the community garden that would be could be utilized for a community composting program. That program would need to be organized and led by volunteers. And so the person that I was working with or who had expressed interest is reaching out through the farmers market network, and I'll send something out to the community gardeners as well to gauge interest in building kind of a little workforce that might want to participate in something like this. So more to follow on that. The amount of the grant is very small, although the type of composting that they were promoting, which was just basically pile composting, is pretty inexpensive in terms of infrastructure needs. So really most of the cost goes into a container where community members would bring their food waste and drop it off, and then the community members would basically empty that container onto the pile each week and turn the material and move it to the next pile as it decayed. So anyway, so I think that it could be a viable program, and they seem to think that we would have enough space there in the area that we were proposing for about 1,000 pounds per week. And if we used a larger space that's kind of adjacent, more closer to the ball fields over there, they said that we could do like 2,000 or 3,000 pounds a week in that area. So anyway, so it could scale up to be something fairly significant. We did talk a little bit about composting markets and places to bring the stuff. And so again, I think the farmers market is a good outlet for some of that material, especially some of the farmers that frequent there may want that material. So that might be kind of almost like a closed loop or a loop system where we could kind of have a built-in market for it. So anyway, so I'm waiting to hear more from the person who's organizing that to see what she has to say. And then this is, of course, in addition to the move that we will make under SB 1383 starting next year, so that all food waste and green waste is collected from all single-family homes here in Palm Springs under the new requirement. So again, this would be in addition to that, and it would probably be marketed towards kind of nearby community members or multifamily folks, that kind of thing, that may not have the same outlet as the single family folks with their bins. So that's where that is, and we continue to have discussions about that. So yes, Lonnie.
So could we give Jake the phone number of this person who you've talked to, who's interested in the composting? Jake, is he still?
Yeah, Jake.
Yeah, so Jake was interested. He's waited all this time, and
sure.
the only thing I just wanted to add to it, I mean, and it sounds like you've done some other really good work on it. It sounds like you've got a small workforce, maybe, there, and the more you could start off with, the more, it's more fun that way. What I did want to mention to Jake, I'm not sure where you're from.
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Okay, well, it's different as far as composting down here. Because it's the desert, it's very difficult to do worms. So culture, we've done it. My husband and I have done it. It was quite something, but it was like living in the garage with an air conditioner. It wasn't energy efficient at all, but we had bazillions of worms. It was amazing. One resource I would really recommend to you is Rivco, Riverside County Waste. It's waste, blah, blah, blah. They run you can easily get to it. It's Riverside County, and then it's Waste Resources or something like that. Maybe you know what it is, Patrick, offhand. But anyway, they do all kinds of composting, and they talk about it, they educate me. You might even be an educator already, but it's a group of people, they are at a higher elevation. So it's not quite the same as down here in the desert. But the desert composting, I'm thinking about figuring out what I can do in my own yard this year. Everything just dries to a crisp. it's like you put something out there, it starts wet by the end of the day. It's so dry, it's incredible.
So that was one of the pieces, what we talked about with these folks is that it needs, not only do you need moisture and water to water the piles, but you also need the other material, the dry materials and the wood, kind of the other waste that gets combined in it. So that's really the job of
kind of the recipe, right?
Yeah, exactly. A little recipe. So, so anyway, so that would be the job of the folks, the volunteers that would do that. And so Jake, I put my email contact in the chat box. So feel free to send me your contact info and I'm happy to connect you guys if you're interested.
Thank you. I am.
It's a big piece. It's
She'll be
good.
thrilled. So,
Patrick, I have a question.
Yes.
The end of last Thursday's council meeting, it sounded like council wanted to bring the plasticware ordinance up. The request was from the next meeting, and Dr. Reddy said no, that was just way too soon. But it sounds like it'll be ready to hit council, I guess, for the first March meeting. So I was wondering if you had an update on that.
And who said it was too soon?
I think it was Council Member Coors who asked that it be
It's
brought
tough.
up to
It's not
council.
going to be real slick and fast. I mean, it's going to have to be done pretty delicately, but I do think the time is coming soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
All
Not
right.
even close.
Okay.
So
He would know.
My response to that request was that we are in no better place right now with regard to restaurants and businesses than we were a year ago, quite honestly.
Okay.
We're getting better, I think. I think that we're moving towards getting more normal kind of operations, but I don't know that, again, that things are in a more stable place where they can take something else on. And I need them 100% focused on organics management.
Okay.
Number one priority that I have. And so if council would like to proceed with this, that's fine. They can take it on, but implementation would be a year out at least. So.
Yeah. Okay. I totally trust you. Defer to you on that.
Okay.
And just a comment. I guess it was in this last week, and this is regarding single-use plastics.
Yeah.
They discovered the placentas of newborn children just a week ago in the UK were permeated with microplastic in the placentas of newborn children.
They've known that.
I know, but wrap your mind around that and how we are continuing to drown in the sea of single-use plastics.
Organ in your body, and you're going to find microplastics.
It's in everything. It's in fish. It's in every tissue. It's not just on the outside. We are the age of plastics in terms of, ages of geology. It's through everything. But this was at an alarming level just last week, and they were looking at it relative to COVID. So this also is an immune issue, but we cannot continue to literally eat a credit card worth of plastic every week just because we're breathing it in and we're eating it.
We understand the problem. I think we need to move on.
Yeah. I get it, and I'm happy to entertain options if they want to talk about them. But if they're looking for some different response from the business community, it's not going to happen for a while.
One thing is styrofoam. If we could get rid of at least all styrofoam, if we could just ban styrofoam, we just didn't do it in the nick of time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was a little bit surprised that the council didn't want to move forward with something a little less aggressive, but they did not. So, so that's the other place. If they're open to considering that, then we might be able to do something.
Yeah.
So, all right. So then the other thing we just wanted to get some quick feedback on from the members is that, as I mentioned at the last meeting, that Commissioner Miller and I have been working through kind of the thought process around how we analyze and determine how and whether it makes sense to do more with processing of food waste through our wastewater treatment system through our anaerobic digestion process. And so what we did with regard to that thinking is lay it out in an analytical roadmap, which we included with your packet this time. And so we wanted to just kind of get a sense from you about what your questions may be about this, what your interest is in it, because we're trying to sort of gauge how to engage the bigger group on this particular topic. So, you know, the analytical roadmap outlines some basic things we need to know and understand, which is, you know, how much material are we working with and where would that come from? And then once we get that material, what sort of process do we need to expand at the wastewater treatment plant to process that stuff? And do we need to make any changes to our current anaerobic digestion system? And then what we do with the stuff that comes out of that, in particular the gas. And so how do we process that and how do we use it? So kind of the big areas of discovery that we need to do. And so Lonnie, did you?
So I have a little different angle, not surprisingly, than Patrick, and because I've been working on it for about 2 years now. And it turns out all of those questions are answered, but they're not, I haven't talked to you about it. And I don't know, you know, just for instance, just some of the questions that have been asked are questions that tell me that, you know, the members of our commission, at least the ones who have been presented with some of this information, really don't know very much about what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about taking high carbon food waste, which is like 20% of what goes into the landfill. While we're taking that and we're running it through the wastewater treatment plant, we're upping the volume in the wastewater treatment plant. The question about, I think it was Rob asked, I can't remember which one. Anyway, that, you know, does it increase the amount of water that we put through the plant? The answer is no, because they use the quantity of water in different tanks going up and down, making sludge in this one, making more cleaner water in this one, shooting it off in that direction. So the water is part of the biochemistry of it. So it doesn't increase water. And so all of the water changes we may have because it rains or it doesn't rain, it's a drought, those can all be worked through. It's kind of a beautiful situation. And then there was another question. Didn't you ask another question, Roy? There was another question.
I asked a question at the meeting, yes.
Yeah.
Converting gas to electricity.
Oh, yes. And were there toxic substances created as a result? Well, there are a number of steps between what's called biogas, which is the untreated, unpurified methane, you know, 70% or, you know, high anyway, much higher than the CO2. It is the really bad stuff, and it's what leaks all over the plant. And by the way, that plant is in the middle of the city and in a residential area of low income families. So already it's a bad situation. So what happens is that it goes from basically contaminated methane primarily, and it's got all this other stuff. It's got lead, it's got nitrogen, it's got all this other stuff that they have siloxanes. By the way, look at some of your hair products. That's where they are. You probably find siloxanes in it. Well, we had to have a whole different machine that takes siloxanes out because it messes up the rest of the machinery. But well, given about 4 different steps in that direction, then you get the good stuff. And that's renewable natural gas, We don't have to use fossil fuels.
But I-
And now, so to use that, you put it in an engine, just like gasoline, and you don't get any toxins, and you don't get any methane or carbon dioxide.
I'd
So-
I'd like to suggest that we go back to the subcommittee on this one.
Okay.
Looking at the time, it's almost
Yeah.
7:30.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so that's what,
Yeah.
that's a good answer to the question that I had, which is what do I want to educate all of the commission on this, but it's going to have to be done in a way that works in with our timing and everything.
It may take a little bit more thought and planning on how we present it to the commission.
I appreciate that.
You
Yeah.
you have a lot of points, and we should take care of it in the subcommittee.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
David?
To add to your research to-do list, which is already pretty large, is that my recollection from the anaerobic digestion facility in Paris that we toured a couple of years ago is that one of the byproducts is sludge, and then they had a sort of a market for, for local agriculture. So in addition to the feed, whether it's gas or electric, and their advantages and disadvantages to both, I think that also should be looked at is what happens to the sludge, and is there agricultural, the growers in the East Valley, would they be interested in that? So that's another sort of, potential byproduct and economic stream, but it sort of puts the city, in addition to being in the energy business, in sort of the ag business.
You're absolutely right, but there are lots of issues with it. And one of the things is California doesn't accept it. It
Oh,
goes to
okay.
Arizona.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. That, I believe that's what I heard, yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway, that's another issue. You're right.
All right, so that's it.
Thank you, Patrick. The next is Standing Subcommittee on World Environment Day.
All I have to report is we are launching the art contest. It's been submitted to the county offices, so it should be distributed out to the teachers the first round. We have new guidelines that have been written. Patrick, I believe, will be writing a press release, so we'll have something coming from sustainability. And once I start posting on social media, if you see it and you want to share it, or if you'd like to email it to anyone that you can think of, let me know. I mean, I think it would be great to personally invite people, adults, as well as, all ages of youth. So super excited about it. It's great that we have 3 categories.
So Jennifer, I think I need to get back to you because I think we need some sort of a request from that organization so that I can respond to it with a check.
Okay.
I think so. I think that's how that works.
Okay. We'll work on that.
Okay. I'll see what we got for the other. I remember we did this with the cultural center, I think. So let me check to see what we did.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. The next is ad hoc subcommittee on walkability and pedestrian planning.
So I did include a little report for everybody, just to give you a sense of where we're at. The next thing that we plan to do through our consultant is to do some virtual walk audits. We had some back and forth about how we would organize those around specific areas or around specific projects. And actually what we ended up with was deciding to do them by district. So we're going to organize the conversation by district, and we were going to identify hotspots within that district to start the conversation, and then people could feel free to add other places. But basically, I was concerned that we weren't covering the whole city and that we were focusing more on the south end than we were on the north end. So the easy way around that is to just do it by district and kind of highlight specific areas that we know are a problem and then open it up for further conversation. So more to follow on that. We're going to schedule those for March.
Thank you, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
The next is ad hoc subcommittee on bicycle routes and cycling. Jim?
So there's a subcommittee report I included with the packet. We had a meeting at the end of last month to discuss what we learned about Dennis, council member Dennis, Dennis's proposal for a two-way cycle track on Palm Canyon. So we discussed what steps we would do to kind of bring that about. And we decided to write a little description proposal. So we did that. We're having another meeting on it tomorrow, and I'll have that to share with the rest of the Sustainability Commission at our next meeting.
Thank you. Ad hoc subcommittee on night sky.
At long last, we got a white paper to you all, and I'm not going to discuss it tonight. We're out of time here, so please read it, and let's discuss next steps to get this through to an ordinance at our March meeting.
So we'll have it under old business at the March meeting. Thank you, Rob. Ad hoc subcommittee on strategic planning and general plan update.
No report.
Okay, thank you. Water conservation.
A couple of quick things. First, in response to the comment from Commissioner Miller at last month's meeting, I followed up with DWA on the bill comparison question. And the comparison is based on meter service size. So customers with the same meter or service size and similar consumption patterns are being compared. So I think for single family residential, that would be, I believe, either a 3/4 or a 1-inch meter. They're grouped together. So that's basically how they do the comparison based on your meter size. This is from Sochi. Ashley is still out, so there may be further details when Ashley comes back. But that's what I heard from Sochi. I'm participating in the Virtual Water Counts Academy. Yeah. I think Chair Clark, you did that a couple of years ago. A lot of interesting information. It runs through March 4th, and I'll report back at our next commission meeting. And finally, DWA and its customers achieved a 5% reduction in potable water consumption, roughly 4% in water production in January 2021, compared with the same month in the 2013 baseline. And even after the recent rains, the state remains largely in a drought situation. So water conservation is very important as always.
Thank you, David. And wellness, anything else to add, Carl?
I was on mute. Nothing more.
Thank you. And desert community energy.
Okay, some really good news. We had the signing ceremony for the 3 power purchase agreements for wind projects out near the train station. Patrick, I had a couple of photos that were taken. There was a good article in Desert Sun, and also was on KSK on the television news. So that you saw the media advisory. That's really the core of what DC is about. And Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Miller, you'll hear more about that next CAC meeting. But that will result in substantial savings. The project where the signing was Coachella Flats, and this is the one where the Planning Commission issued a variance for them to go up to 500 feet, and then after that, I worked with council to change the ordinance, so that's now as of right. But these are a whole bunch of smaller, older wind turbines replaced by roughly 20 super big, efficient ones. So great information, and we'll talk about that in the success story. The DC board is meeting next Tuesday, and they're working. Hopefully we'll get the solar PPA on the agenda for next Tuesday. And finally, the CAC meeting is either February 24th or March 1. It was supposed to be this coming Thursday, but staff's working on the other stuff, so they're focused on that. And we'll be talking about energy conservation and other no-cost or very low-cost programs that DC could consider. And we'll also be working with Grid Alternatives for outreach for the programs to install solar panels on affordable housing units. Okay, great. There's a couple of photos. Thank you very much.
Nice.
So it was appropriately windy. So I had to sort of keep my hat on. So really good news, and I'm glad to see that we're working. There's council member cores there. So.
That was a great event, great announcement.
Yeah.
Okay, so our final item is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda. We'll go around quickly. Anybody has any additional comments or agenda suggestions? And I do have one agenda suggestion from Carl for the next meeting, the Connect IE. We'll include that. Okay, Rob?
No additional comment.
Carl? We have yours.
You have it.
Jim?
Nothing new.
David?
Nothing more from me.
Jennifer?
Nothing from me.
Thank you. Sandra?
Exciting news about the Salton Sea. The money is there. An angel showed up. Investment is there. The water is being restored. The project is going forward. It's very, very exciting. So my question to think about now is how can we in Palm Springs interface, support, and promote this? We'll clearly benefit from this. So how do we get the public behind this and not just thinking we can dismiss the Salton Sea because we can't? But the money's there. It's going forward now. It just got approved. So it's fantastic news.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you can send out? Do you have
I do.
Yes, could I please have one? I'd love that.
I'll send both of the news article to Roy, and then he can distribute that to everybody. It's very exciting. So it came in 2 parts, but there was an angel, and he was bringing in the initial 200 million, and everything else has just gone lickety split. So really exciting.
Okay.
Please send them to Patrick and he can distribute them.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, will do.
Sure.
Greg?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Ron?
I'd like to have the answer to 2 questions. One is, when is the agenda and materials, when is that supposed to be posted before a full commission meeting?
It's 72 hours before the commission meeting.
72 hours. Okay. And what about
Posted on the Thursday before the meeting.
the Thursday before the meeting? Okay. And what about materials that are associated with that? In other words,
We try to get everything, we try to post everything that we have at the time that the agenda is posted. So sometimes we get a few things in after.
it's the same,
around
right?
the Website.
And if it doesn't get in by then, I mean, I assume you're going to get your stuff in. There might be something even you can't get in.
Right.
But we're all going to come to a point where we can't get something in. But I was a little upset when yesterday afternoon, I got another, 8 pages of stuff that I spent, since I had talked to you on Thursday, going through all of this stuff. And to get something else was almost insulting to me. I won't accept it. I didn't read it. I wasn't going to read it. But that's how I feel about it.
Are you referring to my dark sky report?
I think so.
Yeah.
I see.
And we mentioned that we were going to talk about it at the next meeting if we didn't have time today. So that's on our agenda for the next meeting.
Also, if I may say, we didn't really get to pick up on the materials, and what's going on downtown, especially after this holiday weekend, is a little disturbing. I would say be very careful about spending time downtown right now. It's unnerving.
That subject was covered in Patrick's report, and I just
Yeah.
want to emphasize to Lonnie that when we work with individuals, Patrick and I create the agenda, we finalize it the week before the meeting, and if we're expecting anything from commissioners who want to present something, we emphasize that that material should be sent to Patrick on before the Thursday before the meeting, so that it can be included in the package. And we try really hard to get that done. Sometimes there are exceptions, and we apologize for that. But that's what we ask of all of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Important, especially this meeting. There was a lot of material, a lot to prepare, and we want to make sure that everybody has enough time to read the material thoroughly so that we can have a good discussion on the material. And we did on many topics tonight.
Thank you.
Well, I apologize to everybody for putting the time in on this report.
Well, it looked beautiful from what I saw, but I cut my report because we didn't have time.
Rob, thank you for writing the report, and we will discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay.
Rob and Jim. Thank you. Anything else before the motion to adjourn?
I have I will send it to you and then we can share it. It's a little personal carbon calculator device you can use. I'll send you the website for it. So it's pretty interesting. They're looking for globally if we can hit a target of 2.0 metric tons of CO2C. Interestingly, most Americans are about 16.4 right now, Europeans at 6.4. And I was proud to say I came in at 1.85. So it's interesting. You just put in all of your information and you can see exactly where your carbon footprint is and what you need to do and what changes you can make to adjust that. So we want to go for that 2.0. So I'll send that to you. It's fun, it's easy, and you know, and you get something worthwhile as a reflection of what you're doing. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So it is now 7:44. Is there a motion to adjourn?
A motion.
Second.
Second.
Without any discussion, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. It was very
Thank you. Thank you.